Welcome, audience, to this EcoBriefs Dialogue conversation with my AI co host Sustaino. I welcome all of you for this episode 2 Evolution of Sustainability Reporting in India. In our previous episode, we understood what BRSR is. Today, we take a step back and understand how sustainability reporting in India has evolved over time. The key objectives of today's session is to understand the regulatory and historical clarity. Today, we understand the journey, not just the destination. I welcome my co host and expert, Sustaino. Welcome, Sustaino.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi, and a warm welcome to all our listeners as well. I'm really excited to dive into this topic. As you said, today is all about tracing how sustainability reporting in India has evolved to where we are today with BRSR. So let's get into the journey and break it down step by step.
Okay, thank you. So with this, we will start. Before we start, I will let you know that for today's session, we have divided the discussion into total 5 to 6 segments, which will make you through the ethos of sustainability and responsible business and its emergence in India. So my first segment, I will start with my Sustaino co-host. Sustaino, tell us that how did the idea of sustainability and responsible business first emerge in India?
Absolutely. Happy to dive into that first segment. So the idea of sustainability and responsible business in India really started emerging gradually, especially from the late 20th century onward. Early on, it was more about corporate social responsibility, or CSR, where companies took on philanthropic activities. But over time, especially in the 2000s, there was a shift. Regulatory frameworks started coming in, and the idea of sustainability got more structured. So it really evolved from voluntary CSR into more formal sustainability practices, eventually leading to frameworks like the BRSR we have today. So that's how the seed was planted and grew over the years.
Okay. Early policy thinking before formal ESG was evolved. Any idea on that?
Absolutely. So before ESG became a formalized concept, India already had some seeds of early policy thinking. For instance, there was a focus on corporate social responsibility guidelines, even in the early 2000s. There were certain voluntary guidelines from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and companies were encouraged to think about social and environmental responsibilities. Over time, this gradually shaped into more structured frameworks. So really, the early policy thinking was all about encouraging responsible business practices before it even had the ESG label.
Perfectly fine. So basically, the key takeaways, what you elaborated, is that India's sustainability journey started with values, and it is much before the regulations. With this, we move to the next segment, where I want to ask you, Sustino, that basically related to the role of MCA and national voluntary guidelines. Basically, what role did the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, that is MCA, plays in formalizing sustainability reporting specifically in India?
Absolutely, that's a great next step. So the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, or MCA, really played a pivotal role here. Back in 2011, the MCA introduced what were known as the National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environmental, and Economic Responsibilities of Business. These guidelines were basically one of the first formal steps to say, hey, businesses, here's a framework for how you should think about sustainability and responsible business conduct. It was voluntary at first, but it set the stage for more formal regulations down the line. And eventually, these guidelines evolved into the business responsibility reports and later into the BRSR. So the MCA really laid the groundwork and guided companies on how to start thinking about sustainability in a structured way.
Yes, correct. Also, can we say that NVGs are India's first attempt to formalize responsible business conduct? Your
Yeah,
take?
yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. The National Voluntary Guidelines, or NVGs, were indeed India's first real attempt to put a formal structure around what responsible business conduct should look like. They were a code blueprint that helped companies start aligning with broader sustainability principles. So in short, yeah, that was really the starting point.
Fine. So, okay, next, let's start with the pace of BRSR journey, the emergence of BRSR. So, in this continuation, my next question for you to address for our audience is in what basically it is related to introduce our audience or the students on BRR, business responsibility reporting. So, when did BRR come into the picture and why was it introduced?
Absolutely. Let's dive into that. So business responsibility reporting, or BRR, actually came into the picture around 2012. This was when the Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI, made it mandatory for the top 100 listed companies to include a BRR as part of their annual reports. And the reason it was introduced was really to take those voluntary guidelines we talked about and give them a bit more regulatory teeth. It was about making sure that large companies were not just talking about responsibility, but actually reporting on it in a standardized way. So BRR were kind of the bridge that took us from those voluntary guidelines into a more formal and mandatory kind of reporting, leading us eventually to the BRSR framework.
Okay, so you mean to say that when it comes to BRR, so it is basically the BRR focused on intent and policies. It's not measurable outcomes, and it was the first ESG style disclosure in India, right?
Exactly, you've got it spot on. The BRR really was more focused on the intent and the policies of a company, kind of like saying, here's what we plan to do, and these are our principles. It wasn't yet about deep measurable outcomes. And yes, it was definitely India's first ESG style disclosure. It laid the groundwork for what would come later with the BRSR, which is much more about measurable performance. So you're absolutely right on that.
Okay. Okay, absolutely right. So now this is what you have introduced about BRR. Now, what are the limitations of BRR and what are the market realities? So basically, I want to ask you that what are the key limitations of BRR that made regulators rethink on the framework?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So, one of the big limitations of BRR was exactly what we talked about. It was more about intentions and policies rather than hard data and measurable outcomes. That meant companies could say, we're committed to these principles. There wasn't a lot of uniformity in how they reported actual performance. Another limitation was that BRR was only required for a relatively small number of companies at the start, just the top 100 or so. So it didn't create a broad-based culture of sustainability reporting across the entire market. Because of these gaps, regulators realized they needed a more comprehensive and standardized framework. And that's what led to the development of BRSR, which focuses more on standardized metrics and measurable results. So in short, the limitations of BRR were really about moving from intentions to more concrete, comparable data.
Okay, so for the students, it means that the BRR created awareness, but not the accountability. Perfectly fine by answered by Sustaino. So now moving to the next segment where we will focus on the transitions from NVGs, National Voluntary Guidelines, to NGRBC. So Sustaino, first explain what NGRBC is. Of course, we have a dedicated next upcoming session on NGRBC, but just for an overview for our students, that how did transition from NVGs to NGRBC has changed the sustainability landscape, especially in Indian BRSR framework perspective, if we talk about.
Absolutely. Let me give a quick overview. So the NVGs, as we talked about, were the National Voluntary Guidelines, and they were the starting point. Now, when these evolved into the National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct, or NGRBC, that was really a shift towards a more comprehensive and updated framework. The NGRBC essentially refined and expanded those earlier guidelines to align more closely with global standards. And it laid a stronger foundation for the BRSR framework by focusing more on accountability, stakeholder interests, and measurable impacts. In other words, the transition to NGRBC kind of modernized and formalized the expectations on businesses. It made the guidelines clearer and more aligned with international best practices. And that set the stage for BRSR to become a more robust, standardized reporting framework in India.
Yeah, perfectly correct. So NGRBC has given India a principled ESG compass. So that is what we can convey from your message that you have given. Okay, about the emergence of BRSR as a mature framework, how did all these developments finally has led to the introduction of BRSR? Could you please summarize?
Absolutely. So, in a nutshell, all of these stacks, from the NVGs to the NGRBC and from BRR to BRSR, were like building blocks. Each step took India's sustainability reporting a little further. So, finally, in 2021, the BRSR, the Business Responsibility and the Sustainability Reporting Framework, was introduced by SEBI. This was the mature, standardized framework that really brought everything together. It made sustainability reporting more robust, consistent, and comparable across companies. So in summary, all these developments led to BRSR by creating a clear principle-based DSG compass and then giving it a strong framework.
That's perfectly fine. BRSR represents the maturity of India's sustainability reporting ecosystem, the overall reporting ecosystem, and it is base for everything. So we are now at the end of this discussion on evolution of BRSR in Indian framework. For our students and audience, could you please summarize year by year, just in two, three lines, which year, what came, then emergence to next or transition to the next system? Can you please explain for summarize it for our student, the evolution of BRSR framework year by year?
Of course, let me summarize that for everyone in a nutshell. So if we look at it step by step, first around 2011, we had the National Voluntary Guidelines, or NVGs, which were the first formal step toward responsible business conduct. Then in 2012, we saw the introduction of the Business Responsibility Reporting, or BRR, which made it mandatory for the top 100 listed companies to report on these guidelines. Moving forward to about 2019, the NVGs evolved into the National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct, or NGRBC, which updated and refined those principles. Finally, in 2021, all of this culminated in the BRSR, or Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting
Perfect.
Framework, which standardized and matured the whole process. So in just a few lines, 2011 gave us the NVGs, 2012 brought in BRR, 2019 transitioned to NGRBC, and by 2021, we had the BRSR as the mature framework.
Yeah, perfectly summarized. Thank you, Sustaino. I think this has been a very important and insightful discussion for our students and audience. To briefly summarize today's episode, we can clearly see that sustainability reporting in India has evolved in a very structured and thoughtful manner. It began with the values and ethical business thinking, moved into voluntary guidelines, then progressed to business responsibility reporting, which created awareness and intent. From there, the introduction of NGRBC brought in a principled and comprehensive framework for responsible business conduct. And finally, all these developments culminated in BRSR, which today represent a mature, structured, and performance-based ESG reporting framework for India. So this evolution from values to guidelines, from BRR to NGRBC, and finally to BRSR, which we are seeing today, shows how India's approach to sustainability reporting has moved from intent to accountability and measurable outcomes. With that, I now invite Sustaino to share a few closing thoughts and reflect on the importance of this learning journey as we continue building structured understanding through EcoBriefs dialogue.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ravi. I think she summed it up perfectly. It's been a really insightful journey to see how India's sustainability reporting has evolved from those early values all the way to the structured BRSR framework we have today. And I think for all our listeners and students, it's a great reminder that sustainability reporting is a journey. It's about growing from just having good intentions to actually being accountable and transparent in a measurable way. So I hope everyone found this discussion helpful. We're looking forward to continuing these dialogues and diving even deeper into ESG topics in future episodes. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
So thank you, Sustaino, for those thoughtful closing reflections. I hope that today's discussion has helped you clearly understand how sustainability reporting in India has evolved from values and voluntary guidelines to a structured, accountable, and performance based framework like BRSR. This historical and regulatory clarity is essential before we move deeper into the technical aspects. And thank you all. Thank you to all our audience, students, learners, and sustainability professionals for joining us in this episode of EcoBriefs Dialogue Conversation with an AI co-host Sustaino. In our next episode, we will take the learnings forward by deep diving into the 9 principles of NGRBC and understand how they form the ethical and governance backbone of BRSR and responsible business conduct in India. I strongly encourage you to subscribe to EcoBriefs Academy by Dr. Ravi Sharma so you don't miss upcoming episodes, structured ESG learning and practical insights aligning with the Indian regulations. Before we close, I would also like to share an announcement and an important announcement. We are soon launching a new exclusive playlist series on the Task Force on Nature Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD. And this will be a unique and first of its kind learning series on YouTube designed specially for the subscriber only, for our subscriber only, channel subscribers only. And this series will focus on understanding nature related risk, opportunities, and disclosures in a clear and practical manner. Please note that this unique TNFD learning series, playlist series, is only for EcoBrief Academy subscribers. So do subscribe, stay connected, and continue this learning journey with us. Thank you once again, and I look forward to meeting you in the next episode of EcoBriefs Dialogue. Thank you very much. Take care.